Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey, welcome to Team House episode 354. I'm Dave. This is Jack. Joined tonight by our guest, Rob Harrison, former Air Force intel guy, with some very interesting stories about his own career and also about the Chapman incident on Roberts Ridge as a firsthand, has some firsthand accounts of that, and then the aftermath also. So, Rob, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate y'all having me. Yeah, my name is Rob Harrison. I spent about 26 years active duty in the Air Force and retired in 2021.
So, Rob, the first thing we always like to ask is our, guest origin story. What led you? How did you grow up, and what led you to the military?
Yeah, I would say. There's some poetry references in here somewhere, but I didn't take a traditional path. Like many young men out there, I might not have known exactly what I wanted to do. I graduated high school. I was always a good student. Ended up on an academic scholarship to a local junior college where I was going to go ahead and knock out my general education requirements before going off to a bigger university, and had always had the military in mind, specifically the Air Force, based on some family lineage, folks that had also served. And I ended up deciding, I came up with this awesome plan. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to party my first semester, and I know that I need to have a 3.0. So I'll squeak by the first semester, and then I'll pull a 4.0 on the second one after I get it all out of my system, and everything will be good. But there was this fine print in my scholarship, and I needed to maintain a 3.0 for each portion of the academic year. And so I got the regret to inform you, Mr. Harrison, but we're going to have to pull your academic scholarship. So I had to tuck my tail between my legs, go back home to mom and dad, fess up to them what had happened. And my dad said, well, what are you going to do about it? So I decided not to put that burden on anybody else, and said, well, I think I'm going to go talk to the Air Force recruiter. And he said, I think that's a good idea.
And so you went to the recruiter, and how did you choose the job that you ended up with?
So that's another, there's a story of irony with this one. I went in, I wanted to fly. I knew that if I was going to join the Air Force, I wanted to be on airplanes. That's what the Air Force does, right? We fly, fight, and win. So I went in to the recruiter. The recruiter said, yes, sorry, I don't have any of those jobs available for you. And I'm like, but I took all these aptitude tests and I qualify for all this stuff. And he says, well, you want to be a linguist? And I said, I'm a redneck from Mississippi. I can barely speak English. What do you mean, study foreign language? And he said, well, you qualify for this test. You've done it. You passed it. You could go do that. And I was like, I don't think so. So I went in open electronics, and in week 5 back then in Air Force basic training, they gave you your job assignments. And I grew up, having family connections to the Air Force that had served in earlier generations. I knew enough about that, and thanks to the Discovery Channel's Wings, episodes way back when, I knew enough about the Air Force to know that to be a missile maintenance guy in the bottom of a silo was not a garden spot.
Right.
And so I raised my hand in the middle of week 5 of basic training and said, somebody said that I could be a linguist, and I passed for this test and so forth. And the guy stopped and he said, anybody else take that test? And somebody caught on to what was going on, and they raised their hand. A side door opened up, and an in-service recruiter came and rescued us for a few hours out of basic training. We went down a side hallway into a private room, signed new contracts, got a Coke and a smile, and became contracted to become an airborne cryptologic linguist.
Fascinating. And so So then I assume, so was DLI the next step for you?
Yeah, after basic, you would go through DLI, pick up your basic language acquisition. I studied Persian Farsi. I finished that and went into the intelligence and the aircrew training pipelines. So you go through your intel analysis schools. We do that in a place called Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas. Then most of our survival stuff, most of it happens up in Washington State. And then by June of '97, I had spent just shy of 2 years in the initial accession pipeline. I made it to my first duty station at Offutt Air Force Base outside of Omaha, Nebraska, in a little town called Bellevue.
Fascinating. And so what were you responsible for there when you were there at Offutt?
At Offutt, I was a new crypto linguist. We were assigned to the RC-135s. I got a chance to qualify on the what we call the rivet joint, the combat scent, and the Cobra ball. I flew probably about 10 different deployments. Fortunately, they were all relatively short aircrew deployments by normal deployment standards. And it all has to do with aircrew hours and keeping folks physiologically from being like overflown, if you will. So back and forth to the sandbox. This was Operation Southern Watch, Northern Watch. Most of my deployments would have been to Prince Sultan Air Base. I did one up to Incirlik, Turkey. And that happened to coincide with events that were unfolding in '99 for Allied force. But on my very first deployment, I went out with the combat scent and the Cobra ball, the combat scent and the rivet joint, and we redeployed back through Ramstein, Germany. And there I ran into an AC-130 Spectre crew and a guy that the personality sticks out. His name is James Patterson O'Brien. And if you could imagine, he's from Boston, and he's got family members that were cops and firemen, and probably one that was a priest. But OB, as they called him, he was an intimidating fellow because he had this cool Spectre patch, and he was wearing all of his subdued patches, and my aircrew patches all looked like a bright shining rainbow compared to his. And he looks at me and gives me this stern, evil look. He's like, "What are you, a fucking Dizzo?" And I had to look at my supervisor at the time. I'm like, what is he talking about? I was like, I don't speak that. He's like, "Well, you had asked, could you ever go down and do our job in Florida?" And he's like, "That's what he's talking about." I was like, "Oh." So I was like, "We can fly on gunships?" And so at that point, it dawned on me on my very first deployment that I was not in the airframe that I was most suited for. The rivet joint was cool. I like to say it can spy on the devil and talk to God. There's enough whiz-bang gadgetry on this aircraft to handle all of today's work. And you have a 12-way adjustable captain's chair, like all kinds of comfort on this aircraft. So anyway, I find out on that very first deployment that I can go work with Air Force Special Operations, and from that planted a seed. And so I had to figure out, like, okay, how do you chart that path? What do you have to do? How do you qualify to get considered to go and do that sort of work? So fast forward, that's what I did, and by 2000, I had done a number of deployments around the world, and I went down to do assessment for what we called Commando Look, and that was so that I could become an intel professional supporting Air Force Special Operations on their various airframes, whether it was AC-130 gunships, MC-130 Talons. They had 53 Pablos, and then ultimately they ended up Ospreys and so on. I got a chance to do and fly all of those.
It sounds kind of challenging, just even rivet joint. It sounds kind of challenging because, like, when you talk about, somebody who is doing signals intelligence at like a regional collection facility or something like that, obviously there is that real-time aspect, but they can also record it, they can go back, they can like assess it, but they're kind of depending on you guys for real-time, like side-by-side interpretation or translation as you're flying, right?
Yeah, there's there's a number of aspects, like ways that you would look at it from the intelligence process that goes along with all of it. But like first and foremost, any intel professional that is assigned to one of those crews, your duty is to the platform itself. And then, oh, by the way, whatever national priority requirements might be levied upon you for tasking and that sort of thing.
Right.
So you basically triage based on prioritization. So preservation of the platform itself comes first and foremost, and then going after whatever national requirements might be tasked to you.
Right. Was it I don't want to say rivet joint in particular, but it was an ISR platform that was brushed and downed by the Chinese a few years ago, right?
So it wasn't a rivet joint. I think the one that you're talking about is the Navy P3 and the Hainan Island incident
in '99.
And oddly enough, I was just having a conversation with somebody about that story today. Fast forward towards the end of my career, I got a chance to be a superintendent of the intel squadron that handled all of the flyers for the RC-135 specifically for the Pacific. And that Hainan Island incident was one of our alum. He was what we would have called a Niner, the 390th Intelligence Squadron. Kurt Towns, his name. He actually happened to be an airman that was augmenting that Navy P3 crew when the Hainan Island incident happened. And I had several mentors that were part of the repatriation process and so forth. But that was an interesting story. Maybe one for another episode.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of opinions out there on whether or not landing at Hainan Island is the right call under those circumstances.
Right. And then I guess that not to go too, but I guess that there wasn't they didn't do a sufficient burn of everything on the aircraft either.
Yeah.
So,
there's a ton of story that I'd love to share with you one day over a beverage when we're not on this call.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's a deep story.
But just to kind of point out that you talk about intelligence on an AC-130 versus like a 135, and those 130, the most ISR platforms are fairly defenseless. They're out there kind of hanging it out, right?
Yeah, I mean, you operate within international standards.
Sure.
what is known. Everybody's going to do some form of reconnaissance on one another. Intelligence gathering, what have you. But yeah, you go out there. You typically at altitude. You're in international airspace or within an area that you're approved to fly. And then, you're executing your mission, depending on the AOR. I've done everything from off the coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula to, in the Pacific theater, whether it be, North Korea, China, across the Middle East. Most of my deployments and the rest of my formative years were on the AFSOC side. So majority of my time was spent deploying to Iraq, Afghanistan, Horn of Africa, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, so you make it through this selection, and I assume that there's, additional training for you then at that point.
Yeah, the worst part of selection is the psych eval. I hated that part. It was too damn long, and they asked the same question over and over. So I despised it. Turns out the guy that was doing my crew position with OB on that Spectre crew ended up being on my board when I was going through the selection process. And so Jack is his name. Jack ends up telling me, the psych doc came in and debriefed how irritated you got with the number of questions and that you thought that it was bullshit because there wasn't any actual correct answer in the 5 choices that they gave you. I was like, yeah, that's about right. So he gives the readout on the situation, and everybody's like, well, okay. And they did their vote around the room. Everybody slaps the table on approval for Rob. He's like, and then I just started laughing, and I was like, well, what was so funny? I was like, because the psych doc said the same thing when I assessed. So I just laughed at all of them, said, you just let another one of me in the unit, you dumbasses.
So you end up at the 25th Intelligence Squadron at Hurlburt. And what's it like for you when you first show up there?
Back then, really small squadron. We were maybe 80 strong. Small unit. It hadn't exploded yet. When I say exploded, a lot of stuff coincided with 9/11, war on terror, the deployments that resulted from all of that. But we were 80 people strong. I was a young guy coming from the RC-135 arena, trying to figure out, okay, how do I do an intelligence job to support Air Force Special Operations platforms and so on. I had several guys. One of my mentors, a buddy named Ted Gambogi, another guy named Shane Kimmett. We lost Shane in '02 in an aircraft accident in Roosevelt Roads, but those guys kind of helped steer me, down the successful path of how to navigate from the traditional strategic ISR platform down to the soft side, and how to operate in the weeds and do. How do you fit in within that crew? And it really, boiled down to airmanship, and learning your airframe, learning your craft, and being able to mix and mingle with whether it be a special operations airlift mission or a strike or cast platform or rescue, with the rotary lift, you name it. So they helped me navigate it. Jack was one of my primary instructors, and I leaned on him heavily because in the late 90s, Jack and another guy named John Scott had been in some key missions over in Bosnia and Serbia. And Jack specifically, he was the Dizzo on the Pablo mission that flew in to rescue. At the time, it was Lieutenant Colonel Goldfein. He was the squadron commander, I think, of the Triple Nickel, the 555th out of Aviano, if I have all that historically accurate. Anyway, Goldfein went on to become the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. That night, he described it as, he said it was his least proud moment when he successfully intercepted an SA-3 missile, meaning he got shot down. So anyway, Jack and the crew the Pablos get tasked to go and recover those guys, recover him. And if you can imagine, like, where his F-16 gets shot down, like, it's in a heavily defended, air defense, surface to air missile type environment. So Jack, as an intel capability on the Pablos, helps them navigate through low-level terrain masking, threat avoidance, threat warning, that sort of thing. These guys literally fly the gauntlet in order to go and pick up Goldfein, and Goldfein, lives and becomes the chief of staff thanks to the capabilities of Air Force Special Operations, and specifically the ones we call the Steel Horse, the Pablos.
That's wild. That's wild. So while you're at the 25th on your first tour, that's when 9/11 happens.
Yeah. 9/11 happened, obviously September 11th that year. I had just, by about July time period, I had gotten qualified on the U model gunship known as the Spooky, AC-130U. And once 9/11 happened, immediately everybody is in deployment mode. Like, you're just waiting, that the orders are going to come. It's just a matter of, like, the tasking flowing and that sort of thing. So our unit immediately starts spinning people up on additional airframes so that you can maximize, support and, expand capability and so on. They build out the deployment team, and there's a handful of people that know this story, but Rick Cox, if you're listening, I apologize for what I'm about to say. Sorry, not sorry. They were building out the initial deployment team, and I wasn't on the list. And I was recently, I was the guy who had just assessed into the unit, but I was the one who had most recent, experience in our intel mission in that AOR. And so our guys were looking at the seasoned folks, and Rick Cox's name was on the list as one of our folks. And he was out in the Pacific Theater. And as they're going around the room with the initial deployment plan. This fellow named, he becomes Colonel Sip, but Captain Sipowicz, big, tall, athletic dude, grizzled jaw. He just sitting there, stone cold, killer, planning, the deployment operation for our mission set. And he does the around the room, and I'm like, "Yep, new guy here. I got a question." And I made my pitch. I was like, I'm newly qualified on this, but I've got recent experience in this AOR. I've been busting my ass, and my name's not on that list. I was like, I want that changed. And he stops and he listens, goes around the rooms. A whole bunch of people said thumbs up. He's like, all right, Cox is out, Harrison, you're in. And that story has come back, especially after I had made chief. He's like, I remember the day when you, and it was, just a moment where open mouths get fed. You speak up. And in this case, I had reason to. And man, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have made the initial deployment, and things wouldn't have unfolded the way they did in my career. And anyway, sorry, Rick, not sorry.
So let's talk about that initial deployment, because Gecko, Rhino, Anaconda, Roberts, like, you were there for it.
Yeah. So I was extremely fortunate. So I was brand new, and to say brand new amongst, an operator crowd, I didn't even know what a rock drill was. So I was new, when it came to that level of operations. I had some senior folks, a fellow named Ken Wellborn, that took me under his wing. He showed me the ropes.
Hey guys, it's your pal Jack. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the sponsor for this show, which is StopBox. StopBox makes this very cool box to secure your items in, or your valuables, or weapons. Could be a firearm, knife, things that you want to keep away from kids. Opens up like so, and the way it locks is very interesting. And you can change the combination, by the way. So you have these actuators on the side, and in this case, for demonstration purposes, the code is to hold down the index finger and pointer finger, and then come over, and there's a thumb. Hit that, and it opens up. So that's the code. This thing is proudly made in the US of A, so they keep the quality very high. It's also TSA compliant, so you can throw this in a bag and travel with it. And StopBox also offers a range of other innovative products, including their vehicle safe, chamber lock, and other essential gear designed to keep you prepared and protected wherever you are. For a limited time only, our listeners are getting a crazy deal. Not only do you get 10% off your entire order when you use the code HOUSE at StopBoxUSA.com, but they are also giving you a buy one, get one free for their StopBox Pro. That's 10% off and a free StopBox Pro when you use the code HOUSE at StopBoxUSA.com. Discover a better way to balance security and readiness with StopBox.
So your first deployment with them that includes Gecko and Rhino, Anaconda, along with Roberts Ridge. Can you tell us about that deployment and how it starts out for you?
Yeah, so I had just mentioned a fellow by the name of Ken Wellborn, who was our senior guy and had taken me under his wing, showed me the ropes, and kept me from walking into propellers and all kinds of stuff. Ken was a typical, he was the epitome of an awesome senior NCO. He had done a ton of cool stuff in his career, and so at this point, this might have been towards the end of his actual active duty career. So he put me, out in front as much as he possibly could. I had the fortune of being on the very first AC-130 that crossed into Afghanistan airspace after 9/11, and then that led to that initial mission at Gecko and Rhino, which was the airfield seizure that the Rangers had taken over what became Rhino, and Camp Rhino, I think, is what the Marines called it once they took over from the Rangers. And to all the Marines, the Rangers were there first. Then Gecko was Mullah Omar's palace, and that night, that was a huge joint special operations mission. Tons of rotary wing aircraft, fixed wing. I remember charging at the border, and we had 3 gunships and 3 Talons, so 6 C-130s lying abreast, trying to hit tankers as we're pressing in. And the tanker crews were hilarious because they're like, "No, this tail number is supposed to be behind this tanker," and we're like, "Dude, we don't give a shit. Just give us gas." And so they gave us gas, and we pressed on because they were about to screw up times on target. So anyway, we push in. The airborne mission commander is Pete Blaber. He's on board the aircraft that I'm on, and yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because, having been involved in all this stuff, the AC-130 is a platform that's sort of been under fire, like we don't need it anymore since Vietnam. And from what I hear, it's under fire again. I mean, but as they continue to update it, do you see anything else that can replace its capabilities?
Man, I think we'd have to sit here and go to the whiteboard with some sci-fi capabilities. When you talk about, persistent casts and so on, the debate nowadays is, penetrating platforms and, having an environment that allows for a persistent cast platform.
Right.
The debate is over the A-10 that is, phased out and said to be replaced by the F-35. Like, nothing will ever, purposely, specifically be able to replace what the A-10 Warthog could do, just like nothing would ever be able to specifically replace what an AC-130 can do. Could there be something? Yeah, but I'm your typical, I'm a soft guy at heart, so what do? We think outside the box. I could come up with a number of bar napkin ideas on how we could do that. But I don't know. I think there are certain platforms that will always be near and dear and sentimental. So I'd vote to keep it around as long as you can, because I mean, look at what's going on in Iran and Israel right now. If Israel is able to establish air superiority, well, now you have the ability to penetrate with those platforms that weren't initially designed to penetrate.
Right.
So I'd say there's still a need, still a capability that would exist, and still in the future, if push came to shove, you'd create the environment that would allow their operations to continue.
Yeah. So let's go on to Robert's Ridge, if you don't mind. Can you tell us sort of the mission brief for you guys, what your responsibility was, and how it all played out?
Yeah, so that initial deployment was, October. Robert's Ridge is associated with Operation Anaconda, so we got to fast forward to February, March time period of 2002. So just chronologically, you've gone through, Kabul has fallen, Kandahar has fallen, the North has fallen. The Al-Qaeda fighters and Taliban had moved to Tora Bora, and we've gone through the wintertime where they've kind of retreated into their high ground, if you will. Basically, pages out of the playbook that they had used against the Russians in the 80s. Ironically, that was required reading for us as we were going in. I remember books, showing up by the case for The Bear Went Over the Mountain and The Other Side of the Mountain. So it was 80s, war story perspectives, one from, Russian commanders and others from commanders of the Mujahideen. So we obviously cared what the other side of the mountain looked like, and what was unfolding in Operation Anaconda was exactly what we anticipated based on how they had behaved against the Russians in the 80s. So the mission brief is that this is the spring offensive. It's briefed as hammer and anvil. You're going to have special operations, Overwatch, calling in fire support. You're going to have SOF working with indigenous, pushing up against the anvil that is a conventional force, and it's all going to happen right there in the Shiakote Valley. For anybody that follows the Afghan critical battles and stuff, the nearest town that would be significant is that of Marzak. There's areas like the safe houses up in Gerdez. Some of the forces had come out of Bagram down to this area. But anyway, Operation Anaconda is going to be the kickoff of all of that. Ironically, the very first night of Anaconda gets delayed with weather and so forth. And then once we start to move, American forces into position, it becomes immediately obvious that the enemy is already there and they already have a foothold in the high ground. We essentially don't have enough dedicated close air support on station during the very first night of Operation Anaconda, which causes a shuffle of the scheduling plan for the next night. And then we just basically saturate it. So we've got 3 gunships coming out of the north, out of Uzbekistan. We've got 3 gunships coming out of Masira. 6 birds on station staggered over the period of darkness to make sure that there's plenty of cast to go around. And not to mention, the platforms that were well beyond, just the AC-130s. You had other fixed wing capabilities in the area as well. For our specific mission, when Roberts Ridge is unfolding, we are the emergency on-call cast platform. We don't have a dedicated customer that night. Our goal is to basically take off, fly right through Afghanistan airspace, immediately hit a tanker in Pakistan, top off our tanks, and then just stand by for any emergency that may pop up. While that happens, one of our sister ships, a Nail flight, I think it was Nail 20, they were originally tasked for the Mako infill via the Razor elements. So Razor was the MH-47. Some of your listeners, the audience may be familiar with Alan Mack. He's the chief warrant officer that was piloting Razor 03. He's the guy who's taking in the SEAL team that is Mako 30, and their combat controller is Mako 30 Charlie, John Chapman. We are on tanker while Nail is supposed to be covering that infill. Well, there's a series of delays, some of it's maintenance related, and then meanwhile, Kaust airfield comes under attack. So since the infill that Nail's supposed to cover is delayed, Airborne Command and Control decides to re-roll the Nail element to cover the troops in contact situation that erupts at Kaust. And when this is going on, we're literally flying right by that airspace. And we even come up on the radio going, hey, they've got a dedicated mission. Are you sure you don't want us to cover that troops in contact since we're the emergency on-call platform? They're like, nope, Nail's got it. The other guys are delayed. You guys proceed to tanker and don't mess up the tanker flow. So we proceed to the AR track for air refueling. We're topping off our tanks when all of a sudden you hear Mayday, 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 any Grim, any Nail, this is Mako 30 Charlie. And when you hear that, everybody's, quiet as, you can hear a pin drop on the aircraft, believe it or not. We're in the middle, like the 130 gets heavy behind a tanker and we have to execute what they call a toboggan. So you're descending with the tanker in order to maintain airspeed and stay connected, all while this Mayday call is going on. So pilot's talking to the engineer. I'm getting a location of a downed aircraft over some special equipment that I have on board. They execute an emergency breakaway from the tanker, and I pass the coordinates of the downed aircraft and the source of where John Chapman's on the radio, and we just make a beeline to their location. Sensors flew to those specific coordinates, and we just fly straight there and establish an orbit over what is now downed Razor 03 in the valley just north of their original infill position that was at Takur Gar at the mountaintop.
So you guys are looking at the downed aircraft. Meanwhile, things are going on the ridge line. Are you paying attention to both, or do you have a priority there?
So when we fly in, we're trained to the sensors are specifically looking at the coordinates and what turns out to be like the actual helicopter, and you can see friendlies around the crash site. As we're flying in and establishing that orbit, Chappie's on the radio as 30 Charlie telling us that they lost a teammate on top of the mountain, and says, hey, we've got a friendly up there. Can you shift eyes and shift your orbit to that location? And so we hadn't even established a full orbit, but we just immediately slew the sensor to the mountaintop. That's where we see an active IR strobe and an individual laid out on the mountaintop. We've got a sister ship, another Grim element that picks up an orbit around the helicopter, and then we just slid our orbit over to the mountain. So there's two Spectre gunships in neighboring orbits covering the helicopter's crash site and the original infill location. So we're eyes on the infill location, and we are Grim 3-2.
Okay, and is at this point that, well, are you guys there when when Slab's team comes in?
So when they initially tried to infill, no, we were not. So
Right.
we didn't see any of that. What I have seen of that mission is from old historic footage, and I can't find that stuff anymore. Like, I know it still exists, but there's some interesting story in all of that, because that's where Fifi, Petty Officer Neil Roberts, was the guy who fell out of the back of the helicopter. There's a variety of accounts of what happened in that immediate aftermath. I was not specifically there, but I've spoken to one of my mentors, was the intel guy that was supporting those airframes out of Uzbekistan, and he literally debriefed those crews. And so the story is that Fifi fell out of that helicopter. He got jostled loose as they had positioned, getting ready for the infill. So the team is up and they're positioning towards the ramp, and then once they're coming in, the enemy activity is seen by the crew of the helicopter, and they start taking enemy fire. They wave off of the infill, and that's when Roberts gets knocked loose. And the 47 gunner that was there, it would have been a crew chief in the back. He's the tail gunner, if you will. That's what we would have called him in the Air Force. But he said that when Fifi fell, it was happening in slow motion, and all I could see was him smiling back up at him. And so there's different accounts on how exactly that fall happens, and I'll save part of that story for Frank Daly, since he was the one who debriefed those guys. But anyway, the gunner, the crew chief had fallen. Fifi's involved in helping recover that guy, and then Fifi falls after all of that. And the story is that Fifi survived that fall, and Fifi's seen engaging the enemy. But that footage was out there, and then that footage got scrapped. Like it got, I don't know what the circumstances are, but I remember seeing Fifi fight against the enemy up there, and this is all before our gunship. When I say I saw it, it was after the fact.
Right.
I had seen video of this, but I haven't seen it since. And so our perspective, when all this unfolds, that helicopter is now limped off north of the valley. Interesting stories from Alan Mack on how all that happens. Amazing airmanship involved all the way around on that crew. Well, by the time we see what's going on, we've put eyes on, based on Chappie's direction, Petty Officer Roberts is laid out with an active IR strobe, and we see him just laid out stationary on top of the mountain. Upon further inspection, our sensors can see what turns out to be foot pads, and it looks like if you were to do an exploit, like a spliced view of an anthill, it's like you could see the little foot pads, and the difference is because of the heat of the melted snow where they've been walking back and forth versus the cold of the snow top mountain. And so you've got the hot spot of Robert's body. You've got dark what I call rat lines for the foot pads, and then all of a sudden the enemy just come out of the woodwork and they just surround him. So at that point the strobe is extinguished. We don't know the fate of Roberts. We have to assume that we're dealing with a potential survivor. Next thing you know, Roberts is positioned up against the area that they call the boulder, and so that's the big rock outcrop. So if you're looking up slope, where the teams would have infilled to the top of that mountain and been fighting uphill towards what was known as Bunker 1 and Bunker 2, the rock outcrop, the boulder, is that big rock structure that's up there, kind of center mass.
Hey guys, our show is sponsored by GhostBed. Check them out, please. They make awesome mattresses, awesome pillows, awesome bedding. GhostBed provides high quality and super comfortable award-winning mattresses crafted in the US and Canada. Did you know that 60% of US adults report being too hot when they're trying to sleep? That's me. I'm a sweaty little baby. That's why we designed all of our products with cooling features so you stay comfortable and asleep all night long. Pair any of our mattresses with GhostBed's award-winning adjustable base and get the ultimate sleep experience. GhostBed rules the family-owned business, 60,000 plus 5-star reviews. They have sleep experts on staff with 20 plus years of experience. So if you have any questions, you can hit them up and ask them, maybe what kind of mattresses work for you. 20 plus year warranty. That's 2 times the industry standard. Free shipping and returns on mattresses. Most of the products ship out within 24 hours. They have in-house customer support and sleep experts chilling in Plantation, Florida. It rules. It's the best. They give you 101 nights risk-free to make sure that these beds are right for you. If you don't like it after 101 nights, you can send it back, full refund. When you purchase a GhostBed mattress, your comfort guaranteed. I'm reading it right now, and it's capital letters, guaranteed. Okay? They do the right thing, and they're a great company. If you're not sure which GhostBed's right for you, like I said before, you could take their mattress quiz online, or you can give a call to one of their sleep experts, and they'll help you with exactly what you possibly could need, what works for you and what doesn't. And the best news about this is, Team House listeners and viewers, you get an extra 10% off site-wide for a limited time. You just go to ghostbed.com/house and use the code HOUSE at checkout. One more time, that's ghostbed.com/house with the code HOUSE, HOUSE, at checkout for an extra 10% off site-wide. I want to thank GhostBed for their continued support. I want to thank all the fans that listen and watch for their continued support. Without you guys, we are nothing. So thank you for supporting the show, and thank you for supporting the companies that help support the show. ghostbed.com/house for 10% off. Made in the US, made in Canada. Shout out to our brothers in Canada. They rock. Check them out. I love GhostBed. Thanks, guys.
Well, Roberts gets propped up right there, and we assumed that the enemies wounded him and propped him up and left him as bait, knowing that the Americans are going to come back for him and basically lay in an ambush for anybody that comes back.
Right. And is he on the from where we see Chappie's infill? Is he on the near side or the far side or the top side or the bottom side of the boulder? Do you remember?
Roberts is on the near side, so
Okay.
where you look at videos that show the Mako 30 element and Chapman all infilling and then going up the mountain, you can actually see the hot spot that is Petty Officer Roberts.
Okay.
And he's kind of, if you're looking at the boulder and Bunker 1, he's closer to Bunker 1 than he is the far side of the boulder.
Okay.
But he's propped up against the boulder.
Yeah, I don't know if that was included in the video and the analysis that what was his the gentleman who wrote the book? I can't remember, but on the YouTube.
Yeah, it's Dan Schilling.
Right, Dan Schilling. Yes.
Right over my shoulder here, Lori Chapman Longfritz and Dan Schilling wrote Alone at Dawn.
Yeah.
There's a great video out there that Dan narrates, and that's based on the culmination of all of the Air Force's research that went into the John Chapman Medal of Honor package.
Yeah.
So you can see what's in that book, and you can look at that video and hear what Dan narrates, and you can take that as gospel.
Yeah. Okay, so then how long before the Mako 3 team goes in for the recovery?
Yeah, without having the times right in front of me, I
Yeah.
can't give you an exact one.
Can you roughly?
I would say it's probably about an hour before they get the they reinsert to try and recover Roberts. And the difference is that so Razor 03 is down in the valley. 04 had infilled a separate Mako element, but they're the second of the MH-47s, because normally, any rotary lift is usually going to fly in a two ship so that they have self-recovery capability. But they had two distinct teams and two separate infill locations that they were working. But 04 is not going to come home until they've gotten words on 03. So he's orbiting in what we would describe as a black hole, away from populated areas. But he's terrain masked from a line of sight on the radios with his teammate Razor 03, who's now crashed. So 04 is talking to us. We're talking to 03, and we're giving them an update. And Chappie, as 30 Charlie, is coordinating the pickup. And there's an interesting storyline there, because you can look at some of the videos, and Slab says that he ended up having a mission change, and now his mission became to rescue that aircrew. And as a teammate, as a soft team on a helicopter that crashes, unless you literally gather those guys and you exfil on the ground away from that, you're not rescuing anybody. You're being rescued.
Right.
Unless you're the combat controller who is trained to coordinate rescue assets coming in and doing that sort of thing. So Chappie, as 30 Charlie, is the one who actually coordinates via Grim 3-2 to Razor 04 to come in and pick them up. And then they reconstitute at the safe house, figure out their plan of attack, and then they come back to the top of the mountain to recover Roberts. So there's videos out there. It's part of the growing, false narrative that the Navy pushed with Britt Slavinsky, and one of those elements of what I would consider stolen valor. John's the one who effected the rescue of that crew, but the people that did the rescuing were Razor 04.
Right.
So anyway.
Right. So are
Start
you
splitting hairs, but I think it detracts from the credibility of Slab and the rest of the drama that goes on with all of this.
Yeah. So are you guys on station then when that insertion happens?
Yes. So we're on station, and what sucks during all of this is anybody under these circumstances, you would want a close air support platform to potentially soften targets,
Right.
to do some pre-assault fires. But we are a gunship thinking of a survivor on the ground, and everything is danger close proximity.
Right.
And oh, by the way, we were a crew that was involved in a fratricide the very night before. And so you can, armchair quarterback it. I would tell you that the fratricide event that happened the night before, while it was in the mind of the crew, this crew was seasoned and professional enough to put that piece aside and deal with the situation at hand. And the fratricide event from the night before did not, actually impact like the reason why we didn't shoot. We didn't shoot pre-assault fires because we didn't know for sure the status of Roberts, and he was literally danger close. And by definition, there was nobody there that could give us the authority to fire our munitions right there, danger close proximity, when he wasn't in comms giving us the authorization, because he was the one in harm's way.
But for instance, you said that you guys could identify through thermal the rat lines and stuff, so you could see the termination points. So you could essentially, in a way, identify the bunkers, correct?
Yeah, like we knew at times you could see the personnel, and then other times they would mask themselves, right? Camouflage, concealment. But you knew where positions were. You could see where some trenches, you could see where some paths were. You could see areas that would definitely be of interest for us to put down fires. But every one of those would have been in the danger close proximity of where Roberts was, because of how close that area is.
Well, and I don't want to Monday morning quarterback this, because obviously I wasn't there, and I'm like, and the good idea of ferry always happens afterwards. But do you guys have like smoke capability on your bird?
So there would have been back in the day, we would have flown with what they called Willie Pete rounds. You're probably familiar with the white phosphorus.
Yeah.
We didn't have them on board during these, but yeah, Their capabilities, yes. And then one of the other things, discussion that had happened between whether it was command and control, us on board, that sort of thing, there were ideas of laying down fire on the far side of the ridge and walking them up towards the fighter positions, and then keeping our fires on the other side of the boulder that then would have shielded Petty Officer Roberts. So there were a number of tactical, considerations that were given, but ultimately, like, they wanted pre-assault fires. We didn't give them as a result of not knowing the fate of Roberts, and again, danger close.
Sure.
And then we were identifying the spot that we wanted them to infill to. And the idea was that they would come in, get on the ground, establish two-way comms with us, and then they would talk us onto targets, and then we would establish their position on the mountain. Well, I think the tactical debate, and this is, to put words in the mouth of the team leader, and maybe it's not even that. I've seen interviews and heard his take on it, but they didn't want to fight uphill. There was a sense of urgency. They had a teammate that was down. They wanted to get right back to the X. And so the normal consideration of either doing an offset or landing where we had marked for them didn't make tactical sense to them. And so they chose to blow right through our spot and then infill literally right back on the X. Caught us by surprise because we were literally lasing where we wanted them to go.
Right.
And then they blew right through it. And I remember, us talking about it because, somebody's like, "Hey, keep eyes on this, keep marking the LZ." And we're like, "They're already back on the X. Like, they've already hit the ground."
Yeah.
And some of the crew that didn't have eyes on the sensors, that was them catching up on the reality of what was going on. So it happened pretty quick.
Yeah. So, so they land on the X. You guys see somebody fall, and you think that it's due to enemy fire. Later, we found out it was snow, like he fell.
Yeah. So after actions, the order in which the team Mako 30 all exits the aircraft. Slab was first. He doubles over, according to his account, in the snow. Not realizing how deep that snow was. From an aircrew perspective, we literally thought they had been hit by enemy fire and that he was down. That's what put Chapman on point, because Chapman leapfrogged over Slab at this point, and he's recovering from snow in the face and goggles and everything else. And so Chapman's on point going up the slope as the rest of the team gets together to include Slab. And they form a little circle. Some folks would call it a wagon wheel, and Chappie's slightly upslope from them. So he's between their formation and Bunker 1, closest to the most formidable threat, which is Bunker 1 at this moment.
Right.
And then they start taking fire from 3 different directions, and all hell breaks loose.
Right. So Chappie, it looks to me like watching the video, Chappie moves to contact, and he's probably expecting the people on his 6 to move to contact with him. And they decided, I'm not saying they're wrong. I don't know their tactics, but they're not moving to contact. They are deciding what they're going to do next.
Yes. So I'm going to piece this together, just culmination of stuff. And this is access to people who had done the analysis, other SEALs that had analyzed it, others Air Force Special Tactics folks that had looked at it. What you had 2 different thoughts, trains of thought: the move to contact, and then those that didn't. And there was a difference in training of tactics that was going on within that community, according to Eric Deming. He had explained it to me as this the close quarters defense guys, that school of thought moved to contact, and then whatever this other variation of training tactics was, they didn't do it the same way. And so John goes towards the gun,
right,
and is attack the attacker. You got to go through the ambush, as it was explained to me.
Yeah,
he's doing that, and a wedge never forms behind him. Instead, they're breaking off into 2-man fire teams. So the only person that actually follows behind Chappie is Slab himself, because 2 guys are covering downslope. 2 guys are going towards what, if we just consider their infill point and look up the mountain, I'll just say left and right. 2 guys go over to the left of the boulder, and then that would put Chapman on point, Slab a good distance behind him going towards bunker 1.
Right.
And Chappie is the one who is, laying hate to bunker 1, eliminates bunker 1. Eventually Slab catches up to him, but it's after Chappie's eliminated that threat. He's gone through a magazine or 2. He literally goes inside that bunker and, eliminates him at point blank range. And then after all of that, after he's gone in and come out on the other side, that's when Slab finally closes that distance and he fires some confirmatory shots into the bunker. And then Slab and Chappie are both then engage in what we call bunker 2, that's higher above that. And it's actually a bigger threat. It was masked by the tree and the rock there. So Chappie's on the far right, and then Slab is approaching bunker 2 between the boulder and the tree that is right there at bunker 1. So he's got some cover and concealment, but they're both in the fray, and they're both trying to direct fires at bunker 2. And that's when Chappie sustains a mortal wound, gets taken out of the fight, incapacitated, and ultimately Slab believes he's killed. And then he ends up breaking contact from the bunker 2 engagement, coming up with a different plan. You can see that unfold on the video. There's a gunner that climbs up on top of the rock. Enemy frags the top of the grenade, the top of that rock with a grenade. The gunner falls down, and then shortly thereafter, Slab's assessing the situation, and the team makes a collective decision to tactically retreat. They throw some smoke grenades to cover their movement, and they break contact. And all of this is unfolding before our eyes, and we do not have two-way radio contact with the team at all.
Right. And so, yeah, and that difference in tactics is definitely, to me, and Jack, you've seen the video, like, to me, Chapman was moving like a ranger, like it was, it was infantry tactics, right? Movement to contact, and the SEALs were not necessarily following that same protocol. They had their own sort of protocol.
Chappie wasn't foreign to this team, so he had worked with them, and he had not only been in the field, he had done pre-deployment stuff with these same teams. He was no newbie when it came to working with this particular SEAL team.
Yeah. So then, is there any point, like during that operation, where you guys real time realize that Chapman is still alive?
There's a moment of fog and friction, and it happens right as they break contact. So the main element of Mako breaks contact. We assume that all of Mako 3-0 is together, except for Petty Officer Roberts. The radio call comes across, and it's now Slab on the radio, and it is, hey, Grim, this is Mako 3-0. We are no longer on top of the mountain. Got troops down, possible KIA, need fire on tops now. And it's an unconventional 9-line is what he's telling us, right? We know where they are. We've got a strobe on their main element. As you can imagine, you get on top of an objective. If everybody has their strobe emitting, then it presents confusion for sensors that are out there. So there'll be like one main guy that keeps a strobe on for the team, and then everybody else has their other marking capabilities, and we can see who's who. I will say that we momentarily lost eyes on what would have been Chappie when he sustains that initial mortal wound and is incapacitated. Because when they break contact, Chappie's kind of under the cover of the branches of that tree next to bunker 1. And we think that whole team is together. And when he says possible KIA, we assume that he's talking about Petty Officer Roberts.
Right.
Because they were literally right next to Roberts up against that boulder.
Right.
And so, like, we're literally seeing them right next to each other.
Right.
So, the only thing that seems to make sense is that, but again, you assume, right? So we didn't, TTPs have since evolved, and we're way more deliberate about, number of personnel that go on an objective and calling out all of those key elements of information so that you keep tabs on all the right stuff. But at that moment, no, we didn't know. And he calls for fire, and we immediately start trying to put down rounds. Well, on board the gunship, we're trying to shoot with the 40 millimeter Bofors, and on the Spectre, we call that gun 5. There's a gun malfunction with gun 5. The gunners have to take that down, so we switch over primary weapon to gun 6, the 105 howitzer. We had proximity rounds loaded in the 105, so the gunners have to do a round change, because that proximity round, the way that thing's going to work, it's going to spin up, and the way the fuse works on that thing, after it gets so many feet above the ground, it's going to airburst and it's going to shrapnel.
Right.
So since you've got a potential friendly and unknown status, we don't want to shoot the prox rounds unless we know that we're shooting at soft enemy targets.
Right.
So they switch over to a point detonating round that takes the better part of half an orbit. So we're talking from the call for fire to the initial rounds impacting, probably about a minute and a half or so have transpired. So we start going hot with the 105. The infrared sensor is primary on that gun. The TV sensor, he can see all light level TV. So think of this like an NVG capability. He can see, the ambient light that's magnified 60 some odd thousand times that of what it actually is. So he's looking for light sources, and a gunship's tactics will end up being where, if one sensor's firing, another sensor will always be primary on the friendlies. So that sensor is the TV, Chris. Chris is primary on the friendlies, so he's scanning back and forth where the IR is engaging and where the friendlies have egress to. And that way we can keep tabs on what's going on, and then he can also look for light emissions around where we're actually engaging. Well, it's in that moment of those initial rounds that we put down that are all 105 on those known fighting positions up around the higher terrain elevation that Chris says, hey, FOCO, that's the fire control officer that's in charge of the sensors that are actually doing the shooting. He's like, hey, FOCO, I've got another strobe up here. He's like, but this one doesn't look like the others. I've got, like, the main element of friendlies are here, and I got this other strobe here. And so as a crew, they start to deconflict, like, what they're actually seeing. What we're seeing doesn't match what we just heard from Slab as Mako 3-0. And then before you ever get a chance to really communicate that particular fog and friction, the enemy starts lobbing mortars in on top of the LZ, and they're walking them close to where the Mako element is. So you're on to the next closest alligator to the boat. So we saw that strobe come active, and I've seen it. I saw it in real time. I saw it better, in the aftermath of all the analysis. Well, you see Chappie literally crawl back into bunker 1 at that point.
Holy shit.
And so what makes sense to me is that his strobe looks different, either A, because he was using a different strobe, like maybe a backup strobe. We had little IR fireflies, we called them, that stuck on the end of 9-volt batteries.
Yep.
If it wasn't that, if he was using the same exact strobe, then perhaps it was the disbursement of light based on the tree canopy or the any covering that would have been over the bunker area. So anyway, there was a distinct light emission difference when you're looking at those from the footage. And then we're literally going after the mortar situation and trying to cover the team's movement, and they're moving further down the mountain at this point. And we never come back to the idea of there being one of their original team that went back after Roberts being left up there. We never knew that they left a teammate behind.
Yeah.
But we did see that strobe come active, and that was the aha moment. But you're now covering the movement of the team. You're on to something else. You don't have radio comms with anybody else up there. And the sun's coming up, and command and control is ordering us off station.
Right.
Like, you name it. It's like Murphy had a party up there that night.
So yeah, and one of the things about the AC platform that maybe the viewers don't know is because it is a slow moving, low flying aircraft, the Air Force does not like them up when the sun is up.
Yeah, it was expressly against our doctrine to operate during daytime operations, and it it stems back to the first Gulf War. There's an aircraft that everybody in the gunship community knows, Spirit 03. They were done with their mission. There were Marines that needed support. There wasn't believed to be certain surface to air missile threats in the AO in that area of operations at the time. And the gunship stayed in daylight to help out some Marines that needed close air support. Lo and behold, a shoulder launched surface to air missile, man-pad, man-portable air defense system gets launched up at them, and it takes out Spirit 03 and kills the crew. So that is, it's one of those things, like when you go through gunship training, when you go through any of our formal training, it's they have a Spirit 03 award in the formal schoolhouse, for that top student and that sort of thing. So like, this story if you fly gunships. So everybody knows don't fly during daylight at this point in time. So anyway, they are literally ordering us off station. Sun's coming up. It is, past that moment of what we call beginning morning nautical twilight. So it's when you can first start to distinct, daylight from darkness type of deal. We had shut off a couple of command and control radios because we didn't like what we were hearing from them, and they were kind of muddying up the airwaves from our perspective. So we didn't like being told to go home. So from a crew standpoint, we had all checked in nose to tail on call at the direction of the pilot, like, hey, we know what's going on here, stay or go. Everybody check in, and it was unanimous from nose to tail that we wanted to stay and not leave those guys behind. But higher headquarters prevailed, ended up getting a hold of us, even though we had shut off that particular comm net. They found us on another one, and we couldn't hide from them anymore, and we had to break contact. So as we were doing that, we facilitated a handoff with a 2-ship of F-15E Strike Eagles. It was Twister 5-1 and 5-2. Gave them the lowdown, gave them that last known position of Roberts in that bunker where we had seen the strobe, gave them the last known position of the main Mako element. Told them what was going on, told, hey, it's hot, don't go back up there. And then in that fog and friction, none of that information makes it to the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force helicopters that are Razor 01 and 02 with the Ranger elements that are coming in to help bail those guys out. They do a 17+ hour stand. At this point, we've recovered up in Uzbekistan. So I'm not there for the rest of that battle, but it was a significant one, and the Rangers saved the day.
So in Schilling's video, because we see like the time after Chapman recovers and then re-engages. Yes. And that's one video, I believe, right? It's not a compilation video.
Yeah, so it's one video that he has narrated. There are splicing of different sensors at times during that, but they're all time synced. So it is as accurate of a depiction as you could get from the totality of footage that existed.
So do you recall what the other, because you left as Chapman crawled back into bunker 1, yep. and then there's still like Chapman, like there's hours after that, correct? Hours where he continues to fight. Do you know what other platforms were involved in that?
Yeah, so there's a Navy platform that nobody wants to talk about. There's a Predator that is up there. That's the majority of the other footage. But when I mentioned the Roberts footage before, the Navy possesses the footage that showed what Roberts did up there that night, and they're part of why you don't see it anymore.
Yeah. So at any point in time, so with these Predator feeds and these other platforms, Are there people real time watching Chapman continue to fight?
Yes. Yeah. So the theories, like if you go back to the book that was written by Malcolm McPherson called Robert's Ridge, he had access to the people and the studies and the information that was out there at the time. I think that book published in '05. The theories were there were three of them. People thought that person still fighting up there was Roberts. Then there was the Air Force's side of it, that it was Chapman. And then the competing theory was that it was red on red, as an enemy fighting enemy in broad daylight in close quarters, shooting each other in the face.
Right. I wonder
So
who is
that one. That one does not hold water.
Yeah.
And that continues to be part of the counter narrative that the Navy pushed the whole time, so that they didn't have to face the music. That Chapman survived. He was unfortunately left. Now, at the time, in real time, like, they didn't know.
Sure.
I believe that they assumed that he was taken out.
Sure.
Okay. I think that was just straight up fog and friction of war and an honest mistake. And under the tactical circumstances, whether the SEALs ever want to admit that they left somebody behind, it just is what it is. And that's what happened in this case.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't fault anybody for that at all. Look back in the cases that I tell you where our mistakes were.
Right.
Pre-assault fires, the fratricide the night before, clarifying, hey, we saw a strobe in the midst of all of that. Like, there's so many things that could be hot washed and debriefed, and everybody could learn and be better and be stronger the next day for it, if people would have the integrity to just own your mistake and accept it and make yourself and your organization, your unit, bigger, better, faster, stronger tomorrow.
Well, and there's obviously there's a reason, or at least a perceived reason, why they don't, whether it's internal, higher going, oh, you messed up, or it's the public not understanding fog war. We can look at stuff like Tillman, like we can look at all these things, and people who have been in combat will say, you know what, shit happens, unfortunately. Like, there is the fog war. Their mistakes happen all the time. It's horrible. We try to mitigate it, but they happen. And the civilians often won't get that. They don't understand how those things happen. And also if there's punitive stuff going on. But I thought what was really interesting with this is you told us something that we had never heard before, that this looks like, I don't want to say, well, to me it looks like it was a cover up from the very beginning, because you said that DEVGRU actually
100%.
sent people up to confiscate the video.
Yeah, the very next day. So, that period of darkness is 3 to 4 March. All right. So we're landing in the early daylight hours of 4 March. By the next day, on the 5th, somebody had showed up at Uzbekistan at Karshi and confiscated the tapes.
Did they even have the authority to do that? Because you guys are in separate commands.
That's a good question. So a couple of dudes showed up, said, hand it over. I wasn't there when that piece happened. I know who was. I've spoken directly to him. He said it was 2 guys from Blue that showed up in suits, not in uniform, and said, you'll hand it over. And it was based on their commander down in Bahrain. So I don't know exactly what authority they cited. But yeah, at that point, we fell subordinate to what would have been Task Force Dagger. And then, there's a handful of elements. I don't want to misstate anything, but I was part of everything from TF Sword to Dagger to support in K-Bar, and somewhere in there, TF-11 showed up. So there's a whole, change of who's running what show.
But it wasn't like somebody coming down from JSOC, for instance. It was directly from the command itself, from DEVGRU coming, which is what makes it particularly odd or irregular.
Now, that's my understanding. Now, I don't know, I think everybody that is familiar with this knows that General Trebone was the DCG, the Deputy Commanding General at the time that was there forward with them. So I don't know if they cited his name or authority or what, but yeah, they confiscated it.
Yeah.
And so here's the funny thing, and I'll fast forward a little bit, but those tapes are initially recorded on VHS. They're converted to digital and stored on a CD-ROM, and the VHSs get recorded over and rinsed and repeated, on mission after mission. So they're washed out of the VHS. They're stored on the digital. Well, the analyst had already uploaded that stuff to DoD because of the significance of what had happened. So that stuff had transited via email over a server that was deployed with this. We called it the Terra server. Well, in the end, they confiscated the CD-ROMs. What they didn't realize is that the packets of information that transited over that Terra server still resided on the Terra server itself. They just happened to be partitioned into 2,000 little chunks. So in the end, during the Air Force research, they pieced all of that together, complete with all the correct timestamps. I know the individual that did it. Jackie did a hell of a job on that one. So,
Rob,
between her and Frank Daly, the analyst that was there at the time, and started out as the initial analyst to do the research for John Chapman's Medal of Honor. What would have been it was like a higher valor review board or something, valor decoration board or something that was commissioned by the Air Force Special Operations Command based on guidance from the Secretary of the Air Force.
Rob, just one quick follow-up to that. In your career, how many times do you have MIBs show up and confiscate tape like that?
Yeah, do you ever see anybody from Red or Green or anybody else?
Or another command,
Yeah.
a superior command, a subordinate command, anything?
Yeah, so the moment we landed, our number 2 in command for the Spectres that were deployed, he met us at the aircraft the moment that the crew door opened and said, "Give me the tapes. Not welcome back, not how you doing, just give me the tapes." So we gave him the tapes. We knew that something significant had transpired. Hell, we just covered the mission, right? So as that's going on, he's going back into the talk. I don't know what he's doing with the tapes at that point, but they have to get immediately triaged, right? So they had to transmit stuff. They got that piece done before the men in black showed up and confiscated what was believed to be the only copy. So when that colonel showed up and had said, "Give me the tapes," we had deplaned, and there were a couple of us from the TAC crew who had met up underneath the left wing. And that's where we're having that initial conversation of Chris is like, from the TV sensor, he's like, "There was somebody still up there when we left." He's like, "We left somebody alive fighting on top of that mountain. He was still up there." And so that thought is in our mind, but at the same time, we just landed. We're immediately going into crew rest, and you're going to fly the next day to cover the next group of guys that need your help.
Right.
So the debrief is somewhat hasty. It's done. They've got the tapes. They'll triage it. We give them what we can from an intelligence standpoint, and then we're on to the next mission. So this thing essentially, like when they show up and they say, "Give me the tapes," like that thing is put to rest. It's put to bed until, service secretaries say, "Hey, what about, how come?" The question was, what does it take to win the Medal of Honor? I think is the quote from the article from the Secretary of the Air Force at the time. Because there is a ton of significant valor stories, especially out of the Air Force Special Tactics community. I could think of a handful that should be on a list for consideration for Medal of Honor upgrade. But Chapman's story resonated with those that recalled it. It was the strongest case for evidence for an upgrade, and with the ability to piecemeal all of the 2,000 chunks of the original footage back together, then they were able to make the case. And then it only got stronger from there. There's a number of elements of analysis that went into all of this, from the imagery analysis to the medical forensics, you name it. It goes further.
So let's continue with your chronology, because this does come back. What we're talking about right now, the review and everything, you're actually a part of that around 2014, right? So, but between this point in 2014, I want to continue with your story, and then we'll roll back. We'll roll back to this. So from that deployment, which was about roughly a 6-month deployment, you then go relanguage, right? And then you get involved with the MC-12 project.
Yes. So between 02 and 11, I had stayed essentially in that particular mission as a direct support operator for various AFSOC platforms. Relanguaged, picked up Somali. I came back to the unit. At this point, I'm an experienced, seasoned operator, instructor, evaluator. We end up having a new mission that emerges that we call it a light ISR mission, as in light aircraft intel surveillance reconnaissance. We're doing precision geolocation, working with a lot of full motion video. Essentially, we're the find and fix to finding all the bad guys that are out there. So we were building this capability as a seasoned operator on one side. I was asked to help stand that up. So we had 100 new airmen that showed up in this flavor over the span of about a year and a half. Hell, I probably personally trained about 55 of the first 100, but we built out this capability to do this new mission set, and that led to me getting selected to help. They called it normalizing the MC-12 platform. So MC-12 was birthed out of a contingency need, and they were trying to expand this same mission of precision geolocation matched with full motion video sensors to conventional forces beyond just that of a traditional soft customer. And so while that was being done, it was all done as a pickup game. So the capability is literally bought and fielded within 6 months. It rivaled that of the P-51 Mustang. This thing got all kinds of accolades over the year. Hell, they even competed for the what they call the Collier Trophy. It's a National Aeronautic Association. So think of the Mars lander and Felix Baumgartner, who parachuted from outer space. We were competing against the likes of those platforms for the most significant contribution to aviation, all based on the speed and scope of the Project Liberty. So anyway, when they do that mission is birthed from idea. It's being fielded by the Mississippi Air National Guard, my home state. And then everybody basically goes down to Mississippi, gets trained up on the aircraft, gets qualified, and then goes forward and operates them, whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever they happen to be forward deployed to at the time. This is the capabilities fielded around 09. And so by 11, the Air Force has said, okay, we're no longer going to make this just a pickup game. We want them to have a traditional, host wing that owns that mission. And they decide to make the 9th Reconnaissance Wing at Beale Air Force Base out in north of Sacramento, California, the home station for it. And so I get tasked to go out there, stand up a unit of intelligence operators that are going to operate the back of it. And the rest was history. Spent 3 years with that mission based on prior experiences, kind of handpicked for it. Grew a capability with some awesome young airmen. They really kicked butt. And then after 3 years of that, I got brought back down to our parent ISR group, an echelon above the squadrons as an ops superintendent, and then eventually made chief out of there. And that's when that's in that 14 to 16 time period where I was brought on to the Chapman, research project.
So, I didn't mean to skip so far ahead. If we missed anything significant in the rest of your time in and out of the 25th, because from 2001 2001 to 2011 is quite a tour. Did we miss anything significant?
Well, so I mean, a couple of just quick, I guess, brief highlights. But you mentioned Pat Tillman. I was in Afghanistan in '04 when that unfolded. I was not airborne in the midst of the firefight that took Pat's life, but the aftermath of his unit going after the guys that ambushed them, I was there for that. That was interesting. I was I was on the ramp. I was in the hangar when they recited the Ranger Creed. Got to listen to all of the stanzas, and we sat out there and did the honor guide on with our headlamps as we repatriated his body via Humvee onto a C-17, and he was flown back stateside. Fast forward, I was on a mission in the Horn of Africa. So most people know about the Maersk, Alabama. After that, there was a blue water yacht that had been pirated.
Mm-hmm.
I was overhead that aftermath, and that one was a mess. Not the way things typically go down, and there's some historical, SEAL, information that coincides with how the Alabama went down, and then what happened with the blue water yacht incident. And so the SEALs had basically been put on a leash, and so a hostage piracy recovery type of mission, the way you would typically think it would unfold, did not unfold the way you would have expected during that blue water yacht deal. They had been handcuffed so bad that essentially they had coaxed the head pirate off of the boat, brought him on board a naval warship, and he was going to negotiate the transaction for payment and all that kind of stuff. Well, obviously once we had him in our custody, they weren't going to let him go. And so then you had a bunch of idiot pirates that are left, and they all flip out, and in broad daylight, the assault takes place. Everybody dies. It was horrible. But I was overhead that one. That one just sucked. But if you think about the storylines that go along with some of the narratives that get spun out of some of the SEAL war stories, I'm not saying the entire community is tainted, but when we look at the Chapman incident and how all of that stuff unfolded, you look back at who has the high ground here, and that is the Air Force, okay? Because when it comes to SEALs and stories, off the battlefield, dude, we could sit here and have a 3-hour episode going through just stuff over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Like I remember going through Joint Special Operations Senior Enlisted Academy. Votel was the commander at SOCOM at the time. And one of the biggest things that we were hitting, this is in the late 15 time period, and we were still hitting on that incident where they had fragged the hostage with a grenade, and they had lied about using grenades on the objective, and everything was about the integrity and why it was important to own your mistakes and to fess up and so forth. And we're coming out of all of that, and it's like nobody ever learns anything. All they do is just create another false narrative, pin a medal on somebody, and move on, and just continue this legend. It's I find it distasteful. I don't think it does them any real honor. I would love to respect the Trident, but right now there's a handful that just tarnish the shit out of it for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when you said they were handcuffed on the Blue Water yacht, was that because of actions that they took on the Maersk, or was it?
That's my understanding. Now, like I wasn't directly involved in the Maersk, Alabama piece, but it was my understanding that those guys went off a little half-cocked in how they executed that one. They were successful, like they did it, and there's a great story that comes out of it. There's another interesting one that Matt Cole tells about in his book in Code of Our Country, but anyway, that was it was dubbed a success. From a leadership standpoint, internal to like SOCOM channels. I don't think that everybody was in agreement in how that mission unfolded.
Yeah.
And so when the Blue Water Yacht piece happened, they were literally handcuffed. So like nothing about that unfolded the way you would have imagined the recovery of a pirated vessel.
Yeah.
Like when do we move on that in broad day?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, nothing about it made sense.
Yeah.
And I was there from the moment that the naval warships, initiated what they would have called the stalk. And so they were just over the horizon. And then, that vessel is going back and further and further towards Somali waters. And then you're up against a timeline of trying to, figure out how you're going to deal with this situation before they get into waters that technically we shouldn't have entered. Under the circumstances, I don't think it would have mattered, whose flag of waters they were in.
Right.
We were going to get it one way or the other. But none of that ever unfolded the way you would have imagined, without getting into specific TTPs. It just, none of it made sense.
Yeah.
And then
So-
in the end, it ends up being broad daylight. Everybody dies. So that is obviously not a success.
Yeah. When you say everybody dies, you're talking about the pirates and the hostages.
Yeah, the pirates executed the hostages, and it's pretty obvious that when the assaulters got on board, nobody else lived.
Yeah. So this brings us to 2014, where you are at the 361st,
Yep.
and I believe wasn't it an article for the Secretary of the Air Force? For some reason, I believe it was an article about airmen, about the Air Force not having won a Medal of Honor since Vietnam, and only one was awarded then. And it's sort of like, what does it take for an airman to win the Medal of Honor? And the Secretary of the Air Force is like, that's a good question. And can we review acts of valor that our airmen and airwomen have performed, during the GWAT, and see if there's anything that would qualify?
Yep. That's the way I recall it. It picked up steam based on an Air Force Times article, and I think that headline was, "What does it take to win the Medal of Honor?"
Right.
And it was based on a number of like Air Force crosses and things like that had specifically come out of the special tactics community. But anyway, the service secretaries across all the services ordered a review of top valor awards to make sure that we hadn't left a stone unturned, if you will. So when the Air Force did their initial look, they had a short list, but at the top of their short list was that of John Chapman and the story of Roberts Ridge. So it worked in the Air Force's favor that they still had that Terra server, thanks to Frank Daly. The funny story he told me was the young analyst that was with him was like, "Hey, those guys came and confiscated the videos. I just found all these clips on the Terra server. Do you want me to go ahead and delete those?" He's like, "No, do not. Save that." And so if it hadn't been for Frank, that stuff could have been lost and never recovered.
Right.
But ironically, in the midst of all of this, once we really picked up steam, and we had already briefed a Mako element, this is like September of 16, but between then and 18, when the final, valor boards are being done at a 4-star level and so forth, before it goes to the SecDef, all of a sudden an unmarked envelope shows up, and inside the double wrapped package are the original classified handwritten marked CDs in Frank Daly's handwriting, because he's the one who had marked those original CDs from the original deployment.
Yeah.
And so wherever that stuff came from, I don't know if it came from Dam Neck, or if it came from a treasure trove down in Tampa out of SOCOM. I don't know. It was not marked. Like when you send something classified, there's specific rules and ways that you package stuff, but there was no way to tell exactly what the source of this was. But somebody wanted to make sure that we got all of it, and they sent it to us. And finally, we had everything to include the original gunship footage that showed our conversation on board and the second strobe and him getting in. And then, oh, by the way, now you had all the rest of the Predator footage and all of the rest of those clips that had been pieced together. So it made for an airtight case, especially with all of the imagery analysis that went into it. There's a guy, I don't talk about him because he's still working certain mission. But when they went and they did the imagery analysis on this, they mapped this thing down to the gnat's ass. Like you could basically put a pin drop anywhere on that mountain. You could put me in a laying prone, kneeling, standing tall, crouch, whatever. And you could look around and give me 360 what my specific field of view was from that point on the mountain. And they did that over the entire area. And that's how we knew that there were inconsistencies in some of the SEALs narrative on, hey, I looked and saw the rise and fall of a laser. I could see him. I verified. I crawled right over the top of him.
Right.
Well, none of that was true. There wasn't a laser illuminated. For that laser, it was a momentary switch. It would have meant that John would have had to have fallen incapacitated and something had direct pressure on that switch, right? And then we would have seen that with our sensors because I can see when their lasers are active on their rifles. You use those as marking devices at times. And then, it lets you know like where they're pointed towards. So enemy on the far side. Anyway, none of this stuff matched. Air Force's research is airtight. The crazy part was the Navy leadership. I'm kind of getting off script, as far as time and order of all of this. But lo and behold, we briefed the surviving members of Mako 30 and what would have been DEVGRU's commander at the time, Captain Jeremy Williams. We briefed them in a DC facility in September of 16, and they had their intel guy, Commander Hartwell. I always get the dude's name mixed up, but they had their intel guy in the room as we're briefing all of them our findings. And I say this because later on, Hartwell is the one who shows up at all the Valor boards with this other version of events. And this is the Navy's version of events, not like what all the research actually showed. And so they constantly say that John died within the first 3 minutes, and they still stick to that story today. So there's a handful of people working on their own documentary, all funded by SEAL money, whatever it is. They still stick to that. Slab's at current accounts still says that John died right beside me in the initial assault. Well, no, he didn't. But one, because you were never right beside him anyway. But nevertheless, John was the one who went and did all that stuff. And then by the time he's killed, it's after the element has broken contact. John is still up around Bunker 1, and the QRF is inbound. And he knows that if he doesn't put down suppressive fire after being up there for an hour and 20 minutes by himself, if he doesn't do that, then the helicopter is going to suffer the same fate that they did when they came in.
So at that point in 2014, when you first get kind of picked for this, were you aware of the like extended fight that happened while you guys were grounded?
Yeah, you're talking about the extended fight on top of the mountain.
The John, when he recovers and continues to fight, were you aware of any of that between like your involvement with that operation and 2014?
I knew that between the time of the event and me being brought onto to the research team, I knew that there were 3 variations of the story. We knew that there was somebody that continued to fight up there after the Mako element had broken contact and before the QRF arrived. That was Captain Self and his Rangers, right? I knew that the competing theories were Roberts and then Chapman and then Red on Red. I didn't believe we knew after the fact that the Predator could confirm based on the sawing motion that they could see that they called they would have told you right then and there. If we had been in direct comms with them, they would have told us right then and there that Roberts had been killed already. We didn't know for sure.
Right.
But we weren't in comms with them. So
Right.
there were people out there that knew that Roberts had been killed at that point,
Right.
that the enemy moved his body and propped him up by the boulder there.
Right.
That only leaves Chappie and the red on red theory. And the fact that the fighting is literally close proximity. I mean, like we're talking, inside of 20 meters in broad daylight. For guys that had occupied that mountain for months, you don't shoot each other in the face in broad daylight. There's no red on red at that distance. I'm sorry. Like that absolutely does not hold water.
Right.
And and there's a funny story when all this stuff came to be. The final brief to Secretary of Defense Mattis, he asked what's the prevailing view of others? What's the leading competing theory? They explained that, and Mattis is like, yeah, I don't buy it.
Yeah. Especially because there was actually hand to hand at that point too.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see that in the footage. Like they're literally hand to hand, and Chappie prevails in that engagement as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oh, by the way, so when we say that he was incapacitated, the medical forensics showed that was a mortal wound. Without attention, he would have died from that wound, right? Well, he's still this is Rob's theory, but I think a 105 going off right next to your position is one hell of an alarm clock.
Yeah.
I think if you're a seasoned, combat controller, the first thing you're going to do is illuminate a strobe and find cover when that happens. That's what happened. That's what made sense. Okay. Yeah. Like it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put all this stuff together. But oh, by the way, we had so many different layers of evidence that prove, like, there's no question about John, his actions, or the status of his medal. Like he earned his stuff, right?
Yeah.
If there's ever any question, it's why didn't they, present two? Instead, the Air Force literally chose to combine the elements and make it one airtight case.
Right.
But you could split those, and you could provide a basis for 2 medals of honor for John Chapman.
Yeah. Yeah. So, out of curiosity, because you said there was a short list of airmen who probably qualified, do you think that the Air Force's that the Air Force suffers from the fact that they're attachments and so often do not get the recognition they deserve?
From firsthand experience. So I'm not a special tactics airman, right? But I'm a special intelligence capability that exists within Air Force Special Operations. So my parent command is not Air Force Special Operations Command. So when our guys go out and they operate, you got different chains of command. So I've got my administrative chain. We're all, chopped to the same people operationally to execute our missions. But when it comes time to decorate everybody, there's different ways that can happen. The operational authority can do that from theater and submit and cover everybody. Or if it doesn't happen in time and it comes to light later, now you're geographically separated. You're with your administrative chain of command versus the operational one that you were attached to. And yeah, I think that absolutely plays a part in this.
Yeah, it's got to be frustrating. So you see this through 2014, 2016. You guys put it all together. The awards go up. If you weren't directly involved in the politics behind like how the decisions were made, then I don't want to get involved in that. But like, at what point do you kind of hand this off and you're done with it?
So the last significant piece for me, it's, if you think about the joint soft community, with the point that you had just made, the Air Force is often attached, right? Like very seldom are we like the primary unit that is executing a mission, and unless it's like an airborne platform, that's just typically not us. Our specialties are there to exist other soft teams and elements, right? So when we're going through the information process, the boarding process, that initial brief in September of 16, I'm talking with what would have been the 24th SAL commander. So he owned, those respective special tactics airmen. And as we go in, you've got the medical professional, you've got the imagery analyst, you've got Jay Hill, who was on an adjacent mountain, who heard Chappie come up on the radio, asked 30 Charlie, knew him personally, recognized his radio etiquette, recognized his voice, tried to talk to him, but never had positive two-way comms. But he heard Chappie, and it was after the gunship had departed, but before the QRF had showed up. So between that and me articulating the eyewitness testimony from our video that's literally playing, showing Chappie's strobe illuminate and crawl into the bunker, and recounting the audio that is showing Chris explaining to the FOCO, hey, I've got a second strobe. This doesn't look like the others. And then they hear the rest of that mortar attack come in. Like, you can't refute that.
Right.
So as in the spirit of having to play nice with others in the joint soft community, the special tactics community just said, hey, here are the facts, and we're going to let the experts and the witnesses speak to these points. So, if there's a preparation, going into it, it's like, hey, Rob, don't hold back. Like, when you get up there, I want you to tell your side of the story, and just don't back down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you don't have to tell me that, Colonel. Like, I got you. I knew exactly what was going on in the situation that we were walking into, because you knew that there was pushback already. And literally in that meeting, that's the moment where Slab changed his story, because he went from the rise and fall of a laser on the chest to literally, you remember the baseball drug scenario where Rafael Palmeiro says, I did not use performance enhancing, I did not use steroids before Congress. Slab has a moment like that and says, I crawled right over the top of John.
Right.
And we're literally showing him the video that has all of the breadcrumb data showing, like, we've gone back and established the order in which they exited. We have assigned an IR signature to each individual, and we can follow them chain of custody, greater than 90% chance of accuracy based on the totality of all that information. And we can literally see the area where Slab says, I crawled right over him. Like, no, you didn't. You crawled over Roberts.
Right.
And you guys still say that y'all never saw Roberts.
Right.
You were right on top of Roberts.
At the boulder.
Well, at the boulder.
He would have had to crawl over Chappie up near the bunker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the point, like, you follow their egress. The only time that he would have had eyes on Chappie being incapacitated was when they were both engaged in bunker 2, and Slab would have been to the left of the tree, up against the boulder.
Right.
The boulder's on his left, facing up towards bunker 2, and Chappie's on the right of that tree. But we also dropped breadcrumbs there and showed Slab what his field of view would have been. Like, we could literally spin him around. Like, the entire area was scanned to include under the tree. Like, you could see, this is what the canopy was, this is where your terrain was, this is what you could see. And if Chappie had fallen and he was laying out prone the way you described, you literally can't see him from where you said you could.
Right. Right.
And so anyway, his story changed in that briefing. At that moment, said he crawled right over the top of Chappie. The only person he crawled over the top of was Petty Officer Roberts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird because, there have been a number of attempts to, like after some of this came out, then I think there was an argument that, well, Chappie was out of his lane. He was there to provide, to be the CCT. He shouldn't have been assaulting. Like, there have been so many attempts to sort of like.
Yeah.
There was also the theory, right, that he saw Roberts and thought that was Chapman.
Right.
Fog of war. Yeah, I don't know
Sure.
what the truth is
Sure.
there, but
Sure.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think a boat team would ever misidentify one of their original 6 for the 7th combat controller that was augmenting.
Yeah.
I don't buy it.
Yeah. So that's part of your 2.5 years at the 361st.
Yeah.
And then you go to the to work with the RC 135.
Yeah, I ended up in my unit of assignment. I got voted off the island as I had promoted. There were limited number of positions; they were already filled. I drew the straw to go out to what turned out to be the best assignment of my career. I love the mission that we were just talking about, but as far as best overall assignment for me and my family, going out to Okinawa and being the senior enlisted leader for the 390th Intelligence Squadron, that was freaking cool. And the reason is that that's the birthplace of airborne ISR from a modern standpoint. Now, I got a former commander who's a historian, bona fide. He's a professor. He would tell you that the birthplace of airborne ISR started in the European theater. He's absolutely true. I'm not going to argue with him. But as far as the Air Force specific units that we support with the RC-135, there's a mission that used to be the Combat Apple. That's what became and grew into the RC-135 that we know today. And it was stood up by a gentleman by the name of Doyle Larson. Most of the folks in the ISR community know who this is from an Air Force perspective. Our building's named after him. I got to go out there, was there during that unit's 50th anniversary. I know that doesn't seem like much. We just celebrated the Army's 250th, but hey, give us a break. The Air Force is still young. But our squadron had turned 50 out there. I got a chance to be part of that unit while we were doing what we called the pivot to the Pacific. So iron was flowing from the central, theaters over the Middle East, away from Central Command, back over to what is now Indo-PACOM. Our unit, they covered everything from the summit in Singapore, where Trump met with the leader in North Korea, to the Olympics, and then how we would help take care of the South China Sea, with the Chinese like to expand their maritime claims a little bit further than what it is internationally recognized.
That's fascinating. And then from there, you became the IG superintendent for the 16th Air Force.
Yes.
And can you tell us about that? So now you're like a big boss.
Yeah, kind of. I guess always the number two. So as a senior enlisted leader, we're advising those commanders. If you look back at some of my past experiences, from the service, it was nice, a nice kind of twilight assignment there as the IG superintendent, because your whole goal is to speak truth to power, hold people accountable, take care of airmen that are out executing mission and so on. So that was a pretty sweet moment to be able to do that at the end. And then, to have had, this is around the time period, so I'm 18 is when, August of 18 is when Chapman is awarded his Medal of Honor. I got a chance to attend that at the White House as a guest and member of the research team. Then I had reassigned there at the end of 18 to 16th Air Force. So I was, home was San Antonio. And then, towards the end of the IG tour, you do your best to speak up for airmen, hold people accountable when necessary, and just make sure that mission is executed the way it should be.
Was there, was there any heartache on the part of like the research team? Obviously, there are stories about the backroom deals that had to be made with the Navy in terms of, but those are stories. But what we do know is that Slavinsky was awarded a Medal of Honor, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor not at the same time as Chapman. They made sure that his was awarded like prior to.
So, yeah. So back up to September of 16, I told you we briefed the surviving members, Captain Jeremy Williams and Mako. So all the surviving members of Mako 30 are either present in the room, 3 of them in the room, and 1 on a telecon, and it's us presenting information to them, and then the only other extra person in the room is Commander Hartwell. At the end of that meeting, we're getting ready to shuffle out the door, and Jeremy Williams is sitting right next to, he's standing next to Slab, close to the exit. He's just looks over at Slab, he's like, maybe we should look at upgrading yours. This is September of 16. By December of 16, Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus makes a trip out to Dam Neck. Britt Slavinsky, in his own words in an interview, I've got clips. Hopefully, I'll get this to D, and y'all can get these uploaded. But Britt describes the first time that he was informed that he was going to be receiving the Medal of Honor, and that's when the SecNav shows up in September or December of 16 and makes the announcement to their home unit at Dam Neck. And Britt's not even, like, he's out of the service at this point. He was brought back as a guest under the ruse of somebody else's award. And then, oh, by the way, the SecNav makes that announcement. So you don't go from September of 16, Captain Jeremy Williams saying, maybe we should look at upgrading yours, to SecNav showing up within 90 days.
Right.
Like, medals of honor do not happen that fast.
Right.
Especially ones that are from events that are, what would that have been? 16, go back to 2, that would have been 14 years old.
Yeah. And it's not as if new information came out favoring Slavinsky.
Were you an intel guy? I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah. No.
So, yeah. No, there's no new information for Slab. So, like, everybody knew. All right, so back up to the original decorations that were handed out for Britt Slavinsky and John Chapman were their respective service crosses. Slab was awarded the Navy Cross. Chappie was awarded the Air Force Cross. And that was for them being credited to storming and eliminating Bunker 1, saving the team.
Right.
We'll go back and look at the footage. Tell me who eliminated Bunker 1.
Right.
It wasn't Britt Slavinsky.
Right.
Was he present? Was he part of all of this? Abso-friggin-lutely. I won't take anything from the dude, except for when you want to go down the road of stolen valor and Navy false narratives.
Right.
That's crap. And then now you're tarnishing the legacy of John Chapman. Now, it's cemented in the history books, right? Chappie has his Medal of Honor, and it is what it is. But then fast forward to after all of this and the museum, and then they just take a big dump all over the guy again.
Well, it's the Navy SEAL Museum sponsored by the Medal of Honor.
Ta-da.
So, yeah. And then for you, you wrap up at Joint Force Headquarters Cyber, right?
Yeah, we were downsizing the Inspector General team. I still had a little bit of time left before I was actually retiring, and so for my last 12 months, I served as a senior enlisted leader for a cyber element that was there in Texas. There's a number of them on the Joint Force Headquarters side. They align to U.S. Cybercom. And then they execute various mission based on their geographic alignment, depending on who's in the lead. Like the Army runs one, the Navy runs one, the Air Force runs one.
Fantastic. And so, what about now? Like, what are you doing post Air Force career?
So I retired from active duty. I didn't go too far from the herd. I think we kind of like to stay with our tribe. I got a wife who's not very risk averse. My goal was to not be a government mule. I wanted to move as far away from the actual service. I wanted to go hit industry and see where I could make my mark as a civilian. Truly,
sure.
She was like, no, that's cutthroat. I'm like, yeah, that's fine with me. I'm going to survive. But anyway. It becomes a family decision at that point. So I stayed close by. I'm still working in the intelligence community as a government civilian now. I did a transition moment as a contractor, as many people do after their active duty career. And so I work strategic plans for an intel directorate for a training command in the Air Force, and life is good, man. I'm surrounded by good people, have a good culture, a good team. The mission ain't near as sexy as what it used to be.
Sure.
But you're around good people, so that I can deal with.
That's awesome. Did we leave anything out? Do we? Where can people? Are you on social media or anything like that? Where can people find you if they're looking for you?
So I'm not a super public guy. Yeah, I've got a persona out there, but there's also a handful of folks that aren't necessarily my biggest fans that are busy pushing what I call the SEAL false narratives.
Sure.
So I don't get too far into that. Where you will find me is with individuals like y'all that have the ability to use your platform for those of us interested in speaking truth to power. And for that, I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm sure many people have mentioned this to you on the side, but I'd like to say it here. The initial damn it. I just had a senior moment when what the hell do you call that thing that people sign?
Like an affidavit?
No, the one that you started, Dave.
Oh, the
based on
petition.
museum.
The petition.
The petition.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Damn.
Yeah.
Okay, so the petition that you signed, like that kickstarted a lot. It wasn't until between that and Lori's actual post as to what was going on at the Medal of Honor Museum, that's what smoked me out on this. So I thought this was all water under the bridge.
Yeah.
Slab got his medal, Chapman got his, and I thought we had all moved on.
Right.
Well, I didn't realize that Slab had landed like key board positions and that he was involved in such a high manner with the Medal of Honor Museum.
Right.
Not to mention the Congressional Medal of Honor Society.
Right.
And then I start looking based off of what Lori's post was, and I was like, son of a gun. I was like, I could not believe that they were literally going out there and sticking to the false narrative that they used to try to subvert Chapman's medal upgrade to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the point where it's like, all right, well, I'm not naive. I understand where people have power and people have connection and so forth. And if they're not going to be held accountable, all right, that's on somebody else. But I'll tell you this, they won't get away with it.
Yeah.
So I will do my best to make sure that the truth is known and understood. Chapman is a bona fide friggin' hero.
100%. Yeah.
That is an amazing one. And I can't wait until that story becomes more broadly understood. There are efforts underway to do all of that. But you have to take with a grain of salt. And I hate to say this because it then tarnishes the rest of the good SEALs that are out there.
Yeah.
But if you hear a story about SEALs and heroics, you might want to consider that like a barroom legend. You know those stories where you just have to have 10% truth.
Yeah.
And then it makes for a great story. There's too many of those that are out there, especially of late. And all of that stuff ties right back to the specific personality that was Tim Zemansky. And then you can follow the lineage down with key leaders. Wyman Howard is one of them. He's the guy that they called Hatchet Man, documented in Matt Cole's book. I don't have to go any further, but how he connects to the Chapman Medal of Honor upgrade. When the SEALs went down the road of their false narrative, they went and recreated their own videos. Well, guess where Wyman Howard was assigned while all that was going on? He was the DO of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So if you want to recreate footage, if you want to recreate anything, like the same people that mapped that mountaintop and did everything that I was telling you that we could do.
Yeah.
He was the DO a general officer at that premier agency. All while this was going on with the Medal of Honor upgrade and the board and the SEAL false narrative and the subversion efforts.
Weinman is interesting guy. I've had like people tell me in the past that like he was totally different than like the General McChrystals and the Scotty Millers, the like calm, cool, collected kind of personality. That Weinman was like, he would like seethe. Like there's like anger vibrating off of this dude.
So my experience when I met him in person, like I didn't meet him face to face, but that same deployment, it's the 2011 time period when the Blue Water Yacht deal goes down. He comes and pays us a visit based on, at the time he's the DEVGRU commander, and they were in charge of that particular AO. He comes in and gives us a hoo-yah speech in a hangar. Well, they showed up on one of the slick jets. They step off in what we all call the smooths. He's got his suit on, but open collar, no tie. He strutted into that damn hangar. You would have thought he was Tom Brady, like just swagger. And I don't I don't think that he just exuded arrogance. I'm not saying that, but just like you were looking at a dude that you knew was a significant individual, and he just had that executive presence about him. That was what my personal experience, being at least in the same hangar within, throw-in distance of the guy. But it wasn't until I know folks that work with him directly. I've heard good stories. I've read bad. I don't think that's for me to judge, but what I would do is I will leave you with the connective tissue that when they created their false narrative against John Chapman surviving that initial mortal wound, Wyman Howard was the GO, the director of operations at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency.
Wow.
At that same time, Jeremy Williams had fleeted up to the DEVGRU position. So he's the CO at DEVGRU, and the commander of Naval Special Warfare is Tim Zemansky. So how do you go from Slab Medal of Honor from September of 16 to SecNav making the announcement in December of 16?
Yeah.
Because Zemansky was sitting on that and had it ready to go, with no new information, nothing to expand beyond the basis of his Navy Cross, unless we add in that, hey, I rescued the aircrew. Hey, I was in combat for 14 hours.
Right.
Well, like, dude, they were in combat for like 10 minutes and they broke contact.
Right.
And they weren't engaged,
Right.
like after they broke contact.
Right.
Now, did he have wounded? Like, was there a huge fray initially? Absolutely.
Right.
Won't take anything away from it. But look at the basis of his Medal of Honor, and I can poke holes in it left and right.
Well, they basically took a lot of what was on Chapman's and just transferred it over. Basically a copy and paste. So
yeah, so there's a nugget of information on that one, and I'll speak cryptically about this, but when I say that Jeremy Williams is a seedy character, like he's a seedy character. This dude he's a general officer right now competing for a potential 3-star position. If this man goes into a 3-star position as a SEAL, Naval Special Warfare officer, that means that he's going to be commanding in a joint environment. All right. How does a guy go into a 3-star joint command position, whether it's command or a senior staff position that's at a 3-star level? How do you do that in a joint environment, knowing full well that you subverted an Air Force teammate's Medal of Honor upgrade based on a bullshit false narrative?
yeah.
And so to take this further, the cryptic message is when I say that the Navy had every bit of the Air Force information, it wasn't just because the Air Force was willing to share it with them. All right. There was a moment when Jeremy Williams deliberately took the information.
Right.
And I'll leave it at that. But there are specific people that know exactly what happened, and that man continues to go unanswered because he was in some significant places also in 2011 So he's got, a permanent get out of jail free card for some of his own command and his team's, actions. It's bullshit. People need to hold these guys accountable, and I'm not in a position to change it, but I am in a position to speak out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on and
Yeah.
sharing this. This
Thank
is
you,
a lot
Rob.
of firsthand. Yeah. Do we got questions, Steve?
Yeah. Give me one moment. Appreciate the respect and description regarding your teammate from Boston. Can you share a story regarding this Beantown badass? Thanks for the show, guys.
That's got to be OB himself.
No, that's from Matt.
So-
Matt Gabb.
Okay, all right. Yeah, from OB being badass, man. I never had to see him fight, but I would tell you that the Boston accent was enough to make anybody think twice.
We got one more from Corbin. Over the course of your career, would you say technology has helped to increase the effectiveness of communication between the tasked asset in the stack and the eyes on the ground tasking said asset? Or is it just a mixed bag dependent on the people involved in the event?
Yes, on all phases. So inherently, I'm a positive thinker. I'd like to say yes, it improves, but you got to take all that with a grain of salt. There's the Milani report regarding Roberts Ridge and the battle at Takur Ghar talks about the advent of technology and how that at times was believed to be the same as having true situational awareness for what was going on in the battlefield. And I think anybody that's been there knows that'll never replace boots on ground. If you listen to, or if you've read any of Blaber's books, that's one of the consistent themes that he espouses in his book, The Mission, the Men and Me. He always gives credence to the men on the ground. His lesson is listen to the boots on the ground. So I think there's elements where the technology will never completely and totally replace that level of situational awareness, but absolutely it enhances as long as it's not abused or misused.
That's it. Hey, Rob, thank you so much. We deeply appreciate it. It's fascinating.
As I appreciate y'all having me. Thanks for the opportunity. Not most people want to hear the rest of the story on the Chapman piece. Thanks for giving me a chance to tell a little bit of what I would say is otherwise insignificant. If I had to surmise like the key event in my overall career, it's literally having an impact on Chapman's medal upgrade and being there and what's actually carried forward to now. But otherwise, I'm just a small cog in a wheel, but happened to be able to speak truth to power when it counted for that matter. And, damn a seal false narrative. Yeah. You want to tell lies in front of general officers, I'm going to call you out, Commander Hartwell.
And for a bonus for our patron viewers, we're trying to get access to your G Drive where you have basically documented, clip-wise, Slab's changing story over time.
Yeah, I will work with D to get that drive at least over to you guys. You'll have like read only, but however you can technically make that available to your Patreon folks, dude, this is all public stuff. And if nothing else, you can look at the file names and just Google the stuff yourself. It's out there on YouTube. Like it's nothing that came from my own private collection.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. Thanks again, Rob. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. Thank y'all. I appreciate you having me.
All right, everybody. Thank you.
I got one thing. My wife put in my ear, we were talking about the petition before. So you kicked off a huge interest in what was going on at the Medal of Honor Museum.
Yeah.
At the same time, Matt Cubbler started a petition that ties back to Representative Paulina Luna out of Tampa, Florida.
Yeah.
There was confusion amongst the audiences out there. And so what I wanted to relay was, thank you for what you did with your original petition. But if there's any way that you can spark interest towards the one that's tied towards Paulina Luna and having Congress take a look at this event itself,
yes,
we
absolutely
would
will.
appreciate it.
I absolutely will. In fact, I'll link. It'll be in the link below. We'll put it in links below, and I will also through my petition send out a link to Matt's petition.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Thank you guys again. It was a pleasure being here.
Thanks.
Thanks. Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of The Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page, and there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers, and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.